of the amount claimed by the unions was already paid through the normal annual salary increments, leaving only a figure of 624 million as outstanding.
Why can't also they call the union technical team? We sit down with them, they show us how they arrived at 624. They don't want that meeting because they know they are wrong. You cannot claim that you are paid automatic annual increment and you don't have evidence to show. If University X is claiming that they paid this automatic annual increment amounting to 7.2 billion, we want evidence. But you can't come with cooked up figures and you want us to believe.
So the lecturers have been out on the streets going into the fourth week now. Jamila, again, this is over the 2017-2021 CBA.
Yes.
And once again, as with all strikes in this country, we can't seem to decide on the amounts. I will forever remember Sam just talking about how we can't count, and it would seem like, again, there's a dispute over the numbers as we've seen there.
In fact, today there was a meeting between the unions and representatives from SRC and the Ministry of Education in Machakos. But there's been no progress because the lecturers are saying that they do not want SRC in those meetings because of this whole dispute about how much money exactly is in contention here. Of course, we have the unions. You have KUSU, or you have WASU, and you have KUDEIHA. And then you have SRC, and then you have the Ministry of Education meeting to decide exactly what's the way forward. Before we get into the figures, Yvonne, it is important to note that this is the third major strike in less than a year.
Yeah.
It all comes from what we are calling a cobweb of unresolved issues dating back from 2019. At that time, the University's Academic Staff Union and the Inter-Public Universities Council Consultative Forum signed the 2017-2021 CBA. But the cost of that CBA was an issue from the word go. They even went to court. And the government actually lost an appeal this year when they were ordered to pay 7.9 billion shillings. So that's what they were claiming is owed to them from 2017 to 2021. So now the minister comes up and says, no, the amount being owed that is outstanding is only 624 million. It is making a bad situation worse. Because now the WASU and the representatives now are stepping back and saying, no, these are not the numbers. And how is this affecting things, Yvonne? Wanafunzi hawako shuleni. They're not learning. In fact, some of them were talking about how now they're having to spend money on food. They're still having to pay for accommodation. They're still having to worry about their upkeep when they're not studying. So this is a burden on them and also on their parents, because how are you going to make up for almost a month of no classes? There's no backdating hapa. Umelipa chakula, umelipa rent, umelipa all those things. So there's that. And Monica, if it's possible, I was wondering if you could just listen to what the students are saying. There's a student called William Masinde from Maseno and Kevogo Ryan, who's a student leader from KU, who are speaking 1.12 and 1.13 about how this strike is affecting them.
Lecturers should be paid so that we can go back to class, because we are tired of wasting resources that we have been given by our parents. Rent is going at waste, the upkeep is going at waste, and students, we are wasting time.
We students have suffered. We have finished all that we had in our pockets, and we are still struggling with this economic times.
And that's the whole thing. It's not been easy for them, Yvonne. Like, this journey to going to school has been bumpy, to say the least, because we had issues with university funding, the new model that came up. There was even a time that HELB was broke, although the issues now have been resolved a bit. Students didn't even know how much money they're supposed to be paying. Remember the whole banding thing? There were letters that were sent, withdrawn. There were even complaints as late as a month or so ago about students not knowing exactly how much money they're supposed to be paying. So this path to university education the past 2 years has been pretty bumpy for a lot of students. And then now they're unable to continue the classes when there was seemingly some semblance of some normalcy because they're already reported to school. But they're not learning, Yvonne. And these are the same students who are supposed to, one, compete with others in the job market who have gone through maybe the 4 years that they're supposed to without any issues. They are struggling. Now, what are the lecturers saying? We're not going back to class until our money is paid. And this push and pull, Yvonne, is not looking like it's going to end anytime soon. I want us to listen to Constantine Wesonga, the first bite, on the real cost of the CBA according to them, talking about it being 8.8 billion.
From the word go, they insisted that the cost of this CBA was 8.8 billion. And we proved them wrong in court. And we arrived at the conclusion that the cost of the CBA was 16.5 billion.
16.5 billion. And they're talking about the court. I want us to listen to the UASU chair, Lady Grace Nyongesa, about the assertions by the CAS that the amount of money is 624 million, 1.5. And then we can listen to her talking about how they're not negotiating. It's the next bite, both by Grace Nyongesa.
Very clear from what was the judgment of the court, what was paid, and what is the balance is very clear. We are not renegotiating. We are not discussing otherwise. We are only asking for implementation of that CBA. Yeah.
And Yvonne, this one is looking a bit different. It's not the first one. I remember we had, on 18th of September 2024, lecturers down their tools. At the time, they were demanding negotiation of the 2021-2025 CBA. That strike was called off after 9 days to allow an interministerial committee to steer the negotiation. But the parties did not agree on the cost of the CBA. That issue led to another strike that lasted 26 days. On 23rd of November 2024, the government convinced them to go back to work after it committed to pay the money in 3 phases between 2024 and July 2026. But then that one has not been agreed upon again. That's why they're back on the street. Even this one is looking a bit different because they're a bit more adamant. They're insisting that they're not going to go back to class. And we've been seeing how they've been passing their time. We've seen videos of them playing games. They've been dancing. They're thinking, tutakuwa tu hapa, tutakuwa tuna report, but we're not going to go to class. So even this is looking a bit different.
Yeah, and at the heart of all of these, I mean, and you've given us a good breakdown of just this year alone, but since 2017, various strikes, and each strike is about a particular CBA, that's collective bargaining agreement. In 2017, it was about the 2013 to 2017 CBA. And so the question now emerges about why implementation of CBAs is so problematic in Kenya's industrial sector, and it has been, for years, not just in the education sector, in health, in so many others, even with civil servants. Are they done in good faith, or does government use them to kick the can down the road? Are they honest in the negotiations? I mean, in certain instances, the negotiations take so long that you are implementing a particular CBA right in the middle of the cycle. There's always dispute between government and unions, as we're seeing now, over the exact figures. There's the disobedience of court orders, the negotiation process. And in many instances, some of the problems, maybe it's lack of political will, budgetary constraints, where a government makes a promise knowing full well that this is something they're not going to be able to achieve. And then, of course, there's also the conflicting figures we've talked about, the shifting of blame. And then you've got, legal roadblocks. Ministry of Labour will rush to court, or the particular ministry will rush to court. That strike will be declared illegal. And then it's the back and forth. There have been accusations, and indeed, in some cases, it's been true about ignoring court orders. And then the other issue about, implementing the CBAs is not just necessarily down to the amounts of money. It's also about unremitted statutory deductions. Many of these then find that their statutory deductions were not remitted on time. The negotiating process of these CBAs is flawed from the start, with one person having an upper hand. And I don't know if at some point it does speak to the erosion of the power that trade unions have, or perhaps once had, in this country. Infighting within trade unions weakens their collective bargaining power. I mean, this is something you see in various sectors of education. Now with lecturers, you see it with, lower sectors of education. That's primary school, that's secondary school, teachers, doctors and nurses, clinical officers, nurses. We have a problem with collective bargaining agreements. And, when you hear about it, sometimes it sounds very technical. We want this CBA implemented. In fact, right now, they want this current CBA implemented, the 2017-2021, and they want to begin the negotiations for the next cycle, because that's where we are. And so just what does this say about how we negotiate in this country? Sam?
It's rather unfortunate that we have to, every so often, get to this situation where workers are fighting with their employers. And of course, it gets so complicated when you're talking about different agencies involved. If you are to talk about health, then you're talking about two levels of government, different unions that are involved. And one wonders, how will this end? Because previously we've seen strikes stretching for several weeks. Then eventually you see meetings starting to happen, and eventually meetings at State House. Mm-hmm. So with this lecturers' strike, is it waiting for an appointment at State House so that then there can be a bit of talk to say that we have agreed that all these issues will be resolved with immediate effect, and indeed we are committing ourselves that the negotiations for the next CBA should start early as now so that you don't have challenges? I mean, if you're to reflect on what happened just recently with the teachers' meeting, teachers' leadership in State House, I think there were about 10,000 teachers representing the teaching fraternity, and some of the commitments that we had, one wonders, why is it easy to hold a meeting one afternoon at State House, get a lot of concessions, get a lot of directives to different agencies and chairpersons of different committees to go ahead and implement what the president has said, but it is so difficult to engage an educated lot, because I think some of the most educated people teach in our universities. Why is it that we're still dealing with these issues if it's not urgent? Because look, as Jamila says, learners have been in school for more than 3 weeks now. They've not been taught. What does this do to the quality of our education? What does it do to our name out there? How seriously should we be taken? If you can have first years who sat their KCSE last year in 2024, the results were released. We were told that 246,000 of them have qualified to join the universities. We saw the struggle with applications. I think there's a sizable number, tens of thousands, that did not even apply for placement with COOPs. When they eventually report, remember in previous years there's been challenges with accessing help. Yeah. This time around we are told that help is working so hard to an extent that most of them are now getting their help resources. As soon as everything appears to be working when it comes to the side of financing of their programs, they are in school, they've received the help allocation, but there's no one to teach them. Where do they go? What do they do with their time? When I was in Kilifi recently at Pwani University, and I saw those learners, the lecturers had already taken their break to go and protest the challenges they're facing. And you could see students sitting around different structures within the university. What were they doing? Each of them was on their phone and earphones to their ears. They're in their own world. They're supposed to be at the university to learn, to exchange ideas, to learn from each other, to socialize, to become people that are ready to serve not just the country but the world. For 4 weeks, close to 4 weeks now, they've not been engaged in any of those. They've not been exchanging any ideas. Imagine if your first year, the last time you saw a book was in November last year when you're preparing for your final paper. What are we telling these young people? And as you talk about the quality of education, because we're working so hard to implement the competency-based education, but what are we doing to our university education? At a time that every other time you hear the government reviewing and saying there are certain programs that are being taught that should not be being taught, there are universities that do not have the right manpower to teach because you want people with PhDs. When you have a university like Moi University, when the government is saying that there's an overpopulation, there's more lecturers than we need, so we need to resize, we need to rationalize, is that what they call it? Rationalize the manpower and declare redundancies. And part of those redundancies are talking about people who are very experienced, PhDs and professors, that you now feel as a government you no longer need in those universities. So the grievances are as many as there are employees or as there are universities. So every institution has its own unique challenges. But who is suffering? It is the learners. It is these more than 500,000 learners that are in the universities. They're supposed to be being taught. They're supposed to be learning crucial ideas on how to save this country. We're just close to Vision 2030 in 5 years' time. One of our key issues to consider is the manpower, the human capital that is the best in Africa, as we are told by different reports and different speakers. How do you ensure that human capital continues to be the best if you have to look at some of those pictures? And I saw, it looks funny, seeing the lecturers do the dance, wear clothes that are not theirs. I don't know who dresses them. But yes, those are the pictures. I mean, he's supposed to be busy doing research or delivering lessons in class, but they're not doing that. and a country is not even moved to an extent that we're having meetings that are not resolving anything, what are we supposed to tell these learners? A semester is about is it 13 to 16 weeks? We've done 3 weeks, remaining with 10. In those 10, at the minimum, they are supposed to learn, to sit for their continuous assessment, to sit their projects, whether it's their term papers or whatever it is, and also sit an exam and prepare to go home. Those that have in advanced years, they are supposed to go for attachment. So if they come here for internship, what will they be practicing? If the person who was supposed to prepare them for the industry was on the streets doing what they should not be doing.
Yeah, and you know...
Look, Sam, I think you were describing the footage you are seeing there of the...
Clothes that are not theirs. Yeah. That's your interpretation.
Yeah, and you know there's this...
2025.
There's this yet to be concluded issue of search for a national dress. And I think it's going quite literal there. Yeah. But
you need dress imeenda shule.
Yeah. Here is a key concern: the absence of urgency in addressing this is something that should be found disturbing. We've had strikes before, but we've normally seen authorities move quickly to engage and bring that to an end, in the interest of the learners especially, and in the wider interest of national interest itself, because education is a national interest. Some you speak about our human resource attributes as a country. This affects it. And we export a lot of very, very experienced and well-read people out to the region. You go around the region and you find Kenyans doing great works out there. They come from these universities. But certainly this is not sending a very good message even to those potential employers watching out there, because we are delivering an impression of instability in the education sector. And it's quite disturbing. Earlier on, Yvonne, you spoke about the efficiency of the trade unions. I think the likes of Tom Mboya are actually nodding their heads with approval when they watch at least the trade unions that are representing university lecturers. They have been very, very efficient. And remember, the efficiency of trade union is measured by how successful a strike is. And how successful a strike is measured by how disruptive it was. And for the last 21 days, we haven't had any learning in public universities, because basically the trade unions, UASU, is having their say here, and they are having it in a very strong way. They have been able to paralyze learning in universities in order to force the government's hand in meeting the demands that they have put in place. And lastly, the issue of this CBS. When can CBS stop being pieces of paper?
Yeah.
Do governments, and I say governments because the last 3 governments have actually had to deal with major strikes, some involving teachers, others involving university lecturers. And it always comes down to the non-compliance on the part of government. And when the CS actually came up and disputed the amounts, you know, that 7.9 billion has already been paid. I mean, 7.9 billion shillings when it's paid out is not small money. Surely lecturers can locate that either in their pockets or bank accounts if it had been paid. So I think both sides just need to weigh the gravity of this, the impact it has on the future of our learners, and also the impression it's creating of instability in the education sector. The country cannot afford this, and it should not be let to continue beyond now.
Yeah, you know, I think the sad thing for me with every time we continue to have strikes and complaints about something as basic as salaries, right? And something as basic as an agreement, like you say. If an agreement is signed, it should be honored. But have you noticed how we focus on salaries, which is important? But I think because we are so stuck around this, because government cannot seem to ever resolve this issue, we fail to focus on something, a very other important aspect of universities, and that is conducting research. If we can barely even pay the salaries of lecturers, how much money are we even going to be able to put into research? And remember, universities are centers of research for science, for innovation, for greater understanding, for solving national, global problems. And of course, on that front, there's been, a significant drop in the funding for research in various universities. I think about 0.8% of the country's GDP is spent on financing research. There is an organization called the National Research Foundation, I believe, and even they had their funding, the National Research Fund, they had their funding significantly reduced. Now, here's the thing. We can never really move to having the bigger conversations and the bigger picture conversations that will move this country forward, like research and innovation amongst our academicians and our scholars, if we are still not able to resolve things as basic as salaries. This is how other countries have developed in the West. This is how they've done it in the United States, in China, in Europe, where universities are constantly looking for new ways to solve the challenges of the nation. We aren't even having that as a big discussion because we're still stuck with salaries, gross. Is it 7.2? Is it 7.9? Has it been paid? Hasn't it? And so we just find ourselves still stuck in this whirlpool. While we could be thinking much bigger and doing quite a bit with those university lecturers who shouldn't be dancing like we're seeing, who should be in labs, who should be doing research papers, who should be the ones innovating not just for Kenya, but for the world. But if they're still busy asking for gross net 7.9 billion tunamalizana tunaanza na 2025, 2029, we're a very long way from developing in this country if these are the basic fights we're having.
And look, Yvonne, the one thing we need to do, we've seen how government is proud of saying they have paid their foreign debt on time. It's an expression you see from the CS Treasury. We have not defaulted. There's a lot of pride in being on time with the Eurobonds. Yeah. We're even borrowing to pay our foreign debt. Our debt, yeah. We need that same government pride when it comes to domestic obligations. Yeah. And these obligations range from salaries to even pending bills of local contractors out there who are owed monies for many, many years. We need to see the government also sounding very proud that we have paid our lecturers, we have paid our nurses, we have paid our contractors who are owed money, so that it's not just this pride that we express when we settle the installments of our foreign debts.
Yeah, yeah.
And at the same time, the unfortunate thing, and I think as a country we have to seriously think about how we want to manage our public affairs, because how is it that the challenges that we've been facing, even if you have to look at the competency-based education, there has been a serious struggle on the public front. And there are examples to cite, and there are results to see. Because of underinvestment, non-consistent investment in public education, we're having challenges even in outcomes in national examinations. Again, 2 weeks ago, while we were in Kilifi, you will see that KCC results, 72% of the class scoring D+ or below. When you look at what's happening in the institutions, you're seeing institutions, if it's junior school or even secondary schools, that are still struggling with basic infrastructure, whether it's the classrooms or the science laboratories and equipment. Now, you transition from that, having worked so hard, you have an opportunity to join a public university to go and pursue your higher education. You get to a university, and those are the challenges you're witnessing. Now, what alternatives exist? The alternative is private university. What is the cost of the private university? It is extremely expensive. Yeah. How then do you resolve inequality in our country if you're not serious about our public institutions? Because remember that education is a public good. And there has been this conversation, I think it was one of the American presidents talking about coming up with a private solution to a public problem.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be the case. Yeah. Parents should not have to go so deep into their pockets to afford an education for their children because the government that collects taxes to finance the same education is unable to do so. We need to get serious to rethinking how do we want children to transition from the moment they join grade 1. Because you don't hear a lot of problems with ECD teachers or ECD institutions, early childhood education, which are largely managed by counties, but at the same time, there could be private institutions. But once a child gets into the public system of education, there's always a problem. Yeah. Do you want to succeed or not? If you continue to collect more than 2.5 trillion shillings worth of taxes, and you're spending 700 billion shillings on education, that is 28% of our revenue or more. But still, you cannot see the quality. Yeah. Children cannot stay in school as they should. University students cannot be in school when they're supposed to be in school. I don't think we're serious. And we must, as a matter of urgency, have that serious conversation and focus on it beyond the politics.
Can you say the same also about health and others?
Yeah. Correct.
Where the inequalities are stark.
Oh, yes. Unless you go to a private health facility, which is expensive, inaccessible. Yeah. I mean, public health, look at the many Kenyans that are struggling with whether it's...
the issues you'll see there are the same.
Exactly. Right. Whether it's, do you call them chronic conditions? Yeah. They're required to see a doctor regularly, maybe every month or every 3 months. What journeys have they to walk? You saw the other day when you saw cancer survivors or people that are still treating cancer having to go on the streets. Like, really, it should be shameful. Yeah. We should be ashamed of ourselves that you can find patients having to hold demonstrations because hospitals are not working or SHA is not functional in certain institutions. Really?
Yvonne,
in a country that continues to collect taxes?
You talk about inequality, and Yvonne, I know this has been said before, but this what you're talking about, the fact that you're unable to afford to pay university fees for your child, there are issues with the basic primary education, there are issues with secondary education, there are issues with hospitals being unable to afford medical care, does not really apply to those in leadership positions because they're unwell, they go to private hospitals unable to pay. Their children, the universities don't function here, take your children abroad to study. So this really don't really matter to them. And something that the WASU chair lady said as we take a break resonates in my mind. She said, we deserve dignity in service. We deserve dignity in retirement. You must go back to the village and people look at you with respect that this was a worker at the university. So you're frustrating them. And I mean, even to get to the level of being a university professor took a long time. Ulisoma, ukasoma, ukafundisha, ukaandika vitabu, ukapata PhD, ukakuwa professor. So you're belittling that, number one. Number two, you're making universities inhabitable for students and their teachers. And it's just sad.
Yeah, it is. Linus, as we close, take a break?
No, just the agency. We would like to hear the ministry, from the ministry a bit more, from the CS, because someone has to bring this to a close. And you know what? That someone has to be government. That's the reason governments exist. Governments exist because of the most difficult of the problems that humanity can face. And so this is a major test for CS Ogamba. Let's see how you do this.
That's right. Let's take a break. We come back with our final words for the night.